out there, rock and rollers. Welcome to episode number 55 of the Ugly American Werewolf in London Rock Podcast, recorded here in central London, just off historic Abbey Road. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in to episode number 54 on REM's Document, where we featured for the first time my buddy Tom C. discussing that record, seeing them on that tour, and what that music meant to us at a very pivotal time in our lives in high school. We got a lot of great responses from that, and I really appreciate everybody tuning in and downloading there. As we get into the latter part of the year here, we start thinking about Christmas and giving gifts to each other, and a nice big box set that has just come out called Bootlegs Volume 1 from the band that we tend to bring up about every episode. We work them in one way or another, and a band that we did a double episode on back in the spring, and that's rock, pop, prog supergroup Asia. The 80s real first supergroup made up of prog superstars John Wetton from King Crimson, Uriah Heep, and UK fame, Steve Howe from Yes, Jeff Downes from The Buggles and Yes, and Carl Palmer from Emerson, Lake and Palmer. They got together in the early 80s on the new Geffen label and released an album self-titled Asia in 1982 with the juggernaut hit Heat of the Moment, and it went on to be the number one selling album in America that year. A lot of people are freaked out when I tell them that, but it's absolutely the truth. Sold nearly 5 million copies in America and ended up number one. It's the number one selling album on the Billboard chart in 1982. Of course, they were pushed right back in the studio in 1983 to do Alpha, and it had the hit Don't Cry on it, but then some tensions in the band led to them breaking up. John Wetton famously did not play on the Asia live broadcast over MTV in late 1983. They got Carl Palmer's buddy Greg Lake to come in and replace him for that. And then in 1984, they said, we need to get John Wetton back. And John said, fine, but that means Steve Howe has to go. They did go on to make a pretty decent album, Astra, in 1985, but they didn't tour on it because the interest had waned, the band had run its course, and everybody kind of retreated back to their old bands or other avenues from there. And then over the years, Asia went through many different lineup changes before the original band reunited in 2006, 2007, first with a tour and then to do some new albums. This new bootleg box set has 5 different shows from 1982 to 2010. So a couple in the early 80s when they were first together, and then a few from 2006 to 2010 as they got back together and reunited. Now, all of these had been released previously as part of live albums or live bootleg releases in the past from Asia. But this is a nice new set where everything's kind of put together consistently. We've got some new artwork from Roger Dean, a couple little surprises in there for you. So because Jackson and I love Asia so much, we just figured this would be a fun set to talk about, a fun show, and give you an idea for the Asia fan, the prog pop rock fan in your life, something to get them for the holidays. A little bit quick business. You can always tweet us at ugly_werewolf or at ActionJack72, and make sure you subscribe or download anywhere you get your podcast. But of course, you can get all past episodes at www.uglyamericanwerewolf.libsyn.com. So with that, folks, we want to take you on this journey. There's a lot of information to cover here, 5 different concerts for us to review, not to mention the packaging and everything that goes into Asia Bootlegs Volume 1. Strap in, we're going to go in depth here on Asia Bootlegs Volume 1 here on The Wolf. Holy mackerel, man. Lots to go over here on this, besides just the music. I don't know, you know. You got to be a little suspect because I was looking and I don't have all of them, but Asia has released these as like official bootlegs in the past, usually single discs or sometimes 2 discers, and some were a little bit more official than that. But they've released a lot of live albums, like short print live albums, and some of them really did seem like they were bootlegs over the years. Like sometimes they call them that because they don't go into the studio and really clean them up. It's like it's from the soundboard, but it's not what we would do to release like a full live album release, right? You know, that kind of thing?
Yeah, to me, the term bootleg means Fred Rerun Barry at the Doobie Brothers concert with the cassette player in his pants. So yeah, you don't really know what you're going to get. It's somebody who recorded it. It's not official. Who knows? So yeah, I was a little... When it started, I said, what are we going to get here? But I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, it sounds good. It doesn't sound finished. to me, only because if it was a real live record, like we talked about Kiss Alive, they probably would have gone in there and cleaned up the vocals. They probably would have gone in there and added some more crowd noise.
Or fixed the mix a little bit or something like that.
Yeah, a lot of the ones, especially the ones in Tokyo. And I know, Japan has a little bit of a different vibe to it, but it sounded like there were two people there. And I know that's not the case. And I know that, like I said, the people in Japan they're just more reserved. They're having a great time. They show up, but they're not going to scream and yell like the people in the rest of the world. Not like the South Americans at the Maiden shows.
Absolutely true. Yes, they're very reserved. They do applaud at the end of each song, very politely. But they don't scream along. They don't tap their feet and clap and stuff, like we do. But yeah, no, we'll get to that. But that's a good observation because it was the exact same thing. It was the sound for me. The sound on the Tokyo bit was just a little lacking for me. But all right, basically, folks, what we're talking about is the Asia Bootlegs Volume 1. Asia, which is a guilty pleasure of Jackson's and mine, which is also more of an obsession, I would say, in some odd way. But it's just a band we found together and used to laugh and drink and hang out to back in the dorm room. And then, of course, being this music head that I am, I'm like, well, as I got older, I had to do more research and learn more about them. And you hear us work them into every show at least once somehow because there's always a connection. But essentially, there is a big Bootlegs box set out from Asia right now. A 10-discer with 5 different shows from over the years, from 1982 to 2010. And it's got original Roger Dean artwork. And so I thought this would be a fun show for us to do, Jackson. I mean, it's not a classic record in that it just came out, but it is about songs that we've known for a long time. It's about Asia, and there's a lot to do between the box set and everything else here, so I thought it'd be fun.
Right, and Asia's gone through several lineup changes in its history. We saw them in 1992 on the Aqua Tour with John Payne. Mm-hmm. So it was really cool to see. There's 4 or 5. There's 5 concerts total, but they were all the original lineup. They picked and choose what they wanted to do or the shows that they wanted to showcase. So yeah, it is cool to hear the same band do 5 concerts in what was the first one? They started in 82 and ended the last one in
2010.
London. It was 2010. So yeah, you can see the progression of how they went through. They added some new songs in as they went along, and they put out at least one new record, Phoenix, in 2008 of original material. So it was cool to see not the lineup change, but the set list, and to hear the progression of John Wetton's vocals. Which definitely. I mean, I want to start there from the 10,000 foot view of this thing. John Wetton's an animal. I mean, the fact that there isn't, it's cool because the first couple of songs on the first record, it seems like they go in order. Mm-hmm. So to hear him sing those songs without really a break is amazing. But then to hear him play the bass too, I don't think he gets enough credit for that. He's a really good musician when they're doing the solos.
Right.
So, yeah, and start to finish, you can tell he's older in 2010, obviously, but his voice still sounds really good.
Now, I think it sounds even better, honestly. I mean, part of that's probably because the 82 and the 83s aren't perfect. The last 3 are off the soundboard, I'm fairly certain. Maybe 1 is, maybe not. 2 is not, I'm convinced. But anyway, I think his voice sounds rich and he holds his notes very well as he got older, and he wasn't treating himself the way he probably was back in 1982. I mean, look, the first show from Buffalo, which again, this was released as a bootleg in, 2008, 2010 area, somewhere in there. But it wasn't, I feel like they've done something to it. They've cleaned it up here. But John Wetton's voice was maybe a little tired. Steve even mentioned in the show, hey, this is about our 10th show or something like that. It was actually their 11th show in 12 days. And 11th show of their careers, and being who John Wetton was back then, he might have been pushing the limits a little bit there, and maybe he didn't sound as good as when he finally kind of cleaned himself up and got healthy, and even if he gained some weight, he could still really belt it out. But yeah, no, I think John Wetton is what made Asia special what it is. Not that there's anything against the other guys, they're all fantastic, and I talk in here about how awesome I think Carl is to the band, but John Wetton's voice is is the difference maker. It's what
Yeah,
made
because
it
I don't
Asia.
think I'm looking at these track lists here, and I think he was the only vocalist, right? Like he didn't. There wasn't any like.
Oh yeah,
we're
no. This
gonna-
is all original Asia. They're not gonna sub it. It's these four guys on all of them. So yeah, no.
No,
That's
what I'm saying is that I don't think anybody else like. Oh, now we're going to put Jeff on the mic. I mean,
No.
John sung lead on all the tracks, so he didn't get a break unless they were doing the solo stuff.
Right. And Jeff and even Steve, they chime in, and individually they're not great, but you put them both together, and it adds a little something to help John through some of those chorus things, But no, yeah, it's John really his voice carrying Asia most of the time.
Mm-hmm. And doing all the crowd work too, which is cool. I like that. Hey, good to see you. Thanks for coming out. And again, the thing that I really didn't like on this beginning part of this was that you couldn't really hear the crowd. So it really sounds like they're almost kind of playing to empty places, which I know that's not the case, but this is kind of it's what do you want in a live record? Do you want to hear live, or do you want to hear something they put together in the studio to make you think that it was live, or the cleanup version of it?
Right.
And this is cool because it's a little more raw, but the band always sounds good on all of these records.
No, that's absolutely true. We got a lot of stuff to get into here. so let's jump in. But first I want to do the physical packaging.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you get it, and it's not, although it's 10 discs, they don't make it into one of those oversized things you have to basically build a special shelf for, because it's like as big as an LP box or something like that. No, it's got them all in here. One nice kind of big library case where you can slide them in and out, and on the front it's got new original Roger Dean artwork of the leopard paired with the eagle. Very cool, very Dean kind of quality to it, with the Asia Bootlegs logo down there. Nice stuff. And if you bought it, you did get an autographed Roger Dean
very nice
CD insert of it, size thing, which is nice. It's the second time I've gotten Roger's autograph. And then, of course, it comes with a booklet where it kind of outlines the career of Asia. It's by Dave Gallant, who's written their biography and a couple versions of it, and then talks about the different shows and the things they did over the years and how they developed Midnight Sun, which is on the first disc. It's the only song, really, that didn't appear on the first album, because that's all they did. They played the whole first album. Everybody got some solo time, and then they had kind of worked out Midnight Sun. But the thing about it is, and it's very nice, it's well done, it's not huge, but good photos and all that kind of stuff. But it's all photos of them later in the reunion years. There's really no pictures at all from back in the day. It's not like, and every concert is 2 discs. So every case is within the outer shell is about the same. It has the same artwork, but with the different words on it to say, hey, this is Buffalo in 1982, or this is Worcester in 1983 or whatever, and then you fold it open and it's got it there again, all of them kind of their own color, and then there's 2 discs, although the first one probably only needed to be 1, but it makes for a very nice set all together here. But yeah, and even on the back of those, there's no pictures of the band. It's kind of generic. Here are some sepia drums. Here's a sepia headstock or whatever. I'm like, why not put a picture of the band from that era, even if it's not that night? Why don't you include that in there? Now, I know you got to pay photographers and all that, and they basically already had all these in a state where they could release them. So they just kind of gathered 5 of their favorites or whatever, got a design together, got Roger to do this, and then they can push it out there for $80 or $60 or whatever it is.
Well, I remember when they did, what was it, Then and Now in 90, maybe it was 1990, 89 or 90.
Yeah.
The cover was kind of a mashup of all of the different album covers. They had the first one, Alpha, and then they had
the Eagle
third record.
Yeah,
correct.
Astra.
Robot, and the Robot from Astra. And so the what I like about this is it's brand new. This Roger Dean artwork is new for this thing. We have not seen it before. And Dean was always like the 5th member of the band. They always had really interesting packaging done by him to kind of highlight the new stuff. So I'm glad they put a new picture on there and not just rework some old stuff.
Well, I agree, and it's awesome. I mean, combining the eagle with the leopard, the talons and the wings, but then the rest of it's leopard with a tail, but then you got a little leopard ear coming out of the eagle's head. I mean, it's classic Roger Dean, but some of his big trees kind of in the background behind it. Good stuff. Anytime you get new Roger Dean, I think it's great. And hey, he autographed it for you if you buy this one, so that's That's worth the price of admission right there.
But what's not worth the price of admission is I was looking on this, and if you get it from Apple, it's only 24 tracks.
Right.
So you're missing big chunks of this thing if you don't get the actual CDs.
No, absolutely you're not. Yeah, and that's the thing. If you listen to it, if you have your Alexa or your whatever you call it, your Amazon Echo, play it, you can only get 24 of them too. So yes, you're missing out in a big way. But here's the thing. I mean, you get a lot of the same songs.
That's one of the cool things too. I was trying to think of another live record where they've got, or live compilation where they have the same tracks from different shows. I'm sure that's out there somewhere, but I don't remember one off the top of my head. It's interesting to hear how the songs change from, and they're not really changing them up, but they change. The vocal stylings, they change up maybe the way that they deliver it a little bit because, the big hits are the big hits. People want to hear Heat of the Moment. You've got to play it all the time.
Sure.
So, how do you make it interesting for yourself to play it again in 2010?
Right, yeah.
Not 1983.
Yeah, you got to mix it up, right? And, you hear Heat of the Moment 5 different ways. And you hear Soul of Survivor and Time Again and Only Time Will Tell, 5 different ways. Steve Howe gets a solo, but he plays clap 4 times. He goes on 4 times, and sometimes Carl gets to do his drum solo there. So, I mean, yeah, you hear a lot of these over, but they were on 5 different tours. Right? Same guys, but 5 different tours, 82, 83, 2007, 2008, and 2010. And it's actually cool that they got back together and did so much work later. Not just, okay, we'll do a one-off, but we'll get into all of that. I mean, we can kind of walk through here show by show, and we can kind of give a little background. So 1982, Buffalo, it's there in May. It's their 11th show of their career together. It's getting into the summer here where Heat of the Moment is going to be this enormous hit. And they're playing theaters because they figure, hey, we're a new band. And our old, the stuff that we used to do in our former bands, all that prog, really kind of took a beating at the end of the 70s and the early 80s with the punks. And then the new wave coming in is like, that wasn't cool. So the band is just starting out. They decided they're not going to play anything from their old catalogs. They're only going to do original Asia stuff, which means they basically have to play their entire first album. Everybody gets to have some solo time. Of course, Steve Howe can really go out there and do it a long time because he's got all sorts of things to choose from. But everybody gets some solo time. And then a worked up Midnight Sun, which would, of course, appear on the second album, Alva, but hadn't been released yet. And it was, it was cool that at some point during that original tour, all 4 of them would come because Jeff had this amazing keyboard array, and during Midnight Sun, at some point, each of them all of them together would be on one of Jeff's keyboards. So all 4 of them are playing that together, which is kind of cool. But because they were all of a sudden hot with Heat of the Moment, tickets were selling for $5.50. You could sit in the second row for $5.50. They became the hottest tickets in town. Eventually, at the end of the tour, they had to be filling arenas, so they went from 2,000 to 4,000 to like 10 to 20 in the matter of just a few months.
And I think it's cool that they recorded this. Because at this point in time, it was still probably a fairly expensive undertaking. And if they had not planned to do a live record, I really don't know what the purpose of this was, but I'm glad they did it because it was cool to hear this in kind of its infancy, 11 shows in the band's history. Not like, oh, this is, this tour, we've done this so many times. No, I mean, these guys had played for years in other bands, but together this was still in its infancy. So I do like the fact that, but I mean, you can even tell, even on this show, they're all tight. I mean, they play really well together.
They are tight.
And that's called being a professional musician.
That's right. Yeah. So I mean, they're not doing big stadiums. They're doing theaters. And they're not doing a 2-hour set. They're trying to squeeze out an hour and a half somehow,
Right. Although I don't know. At the beginning, you're probably right. They wouldn't have gone. The crowds probably wouldn't have gone for the catalog stuff. But you never know. That would have been kind of cool for them to bust out, an old Yes tune or something. But yeah, that just wasn't. The crowd that was showing up there was there to see the Asia music, not the back catalog.
Right, the MTV, hit you quick and fast. Yeah, absolutely. So they played them all, but they did not play any of their B-sides, which they would later on some of these discs, and we'll get into that. I think it sounds cleaner than the Buffalo 2-discer that they released over a decade ago. I think just from Time Again, jumping out on the first song, good rhythm and tempo, and Jeff was a little drowned out at first, but Steve was on in this show. John had his rumbling bass to there. Boom, 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 boom. He was really coming through. Maybe the backing vocals were a little bit weak, but to me, there's some standouts on it. I mean, Cutting It Fine stands out really well to me, and his solo fades back into it with the band. There's some standouts on here for sure. How about you?
Yeah, I think it sounds really good. My only the down part on this one is heat of the moment. He's kind of misses a couple of the high notes there. But again, this is live stuff.
Right.
They probably, if this was going to be an official release, they probably would have gone in there and cleaned that up. But it was interesting to me to hear how it would have sounded then. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, if you're a singer, you've got to have, I guess, monitors in your ear. But how do you hit those high notes? How do you know that you're up there in the register you need to be? I don't know. So it could have been that he was tired. It could have been something was off. But I mean, it still sounded good. And it really sounded like you were at the show.
Well, that's true, yeah, for sure. But then there were some rough moments, too, like Only Time Will Tell. Great beginning, but Jeff wasn't that great in the mix in that. And then there was an odd fade, like it was just kind of over. It's like, well, okay, maybe that really is a bootleg. Maybe he stepped on it, or maybe he dropped it on the ground and we had to cut after that. I don't know. But although Soul Survivor, I thought was very strong.
Yeah,
and Soul Survivor's one of the ones you'll hear on all five.
We had talked in our KISS shows in the past about Alive, and that was a huge record, and that was famously not really live. They went in and cleaned it up, and I think there are a lot of quote-unquote live records where that happens. So again, I really like this thing, kind of hearing the warts and all, and in 1982 and then again in 83, I'm sure the sound, the way that it was put together, the way that it was recorded, I don't know what kind of budget they had to do this. So it was interesting to me to hear more of a live record than a kind of a studio cleanup version.
No, this is them at a moment in time, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Correct.
It's the real thing. It's their first tour together. It's their 11th show.
Yeah.
And I had a thing called Quadra that I bought years ago. It was kind of an unofficial, official live release that had a Pittsburgh show, which is maybe a week before this on it. It included the Worcester Mass, which is the next two discs. And then it had, I think it had either one from Detroit, from Pine Knob in Detroit there that was kind of brief, if I'm not mistaken. But it was kind of all original band. So I'm wondering if maybe Pittsburgh is in the next, if they do a volume 2, would they pick that as the next of the 1982 tour to include on that?
Yeah, I mean, which you think you would. Why would you call this volume 1 if your plan wasn't to put out more of these?
Right. I mean, it's called Volume 1 for a reason, right?
I would think.
And from my sources in the industry, because, I'm pretty well connected over here in London, Jerry, is that there is going to be another release next year. Now, I don't know if that's going to be Bootlegs Volume 2. What I think a lot of Asia fans would hope for in 2022 is a 40th anniversary release of Asia. But according to Jeff Downs in Classic Rock Magazine, those masters may have been lost in the universal fire that ate up so many masters, whenever that was, 15 years ago.
Oh, yeah, that would be... That would make sense, and that would be horrible because, yes, a 40th anniversary of that would be really something people... I mean, if you're into this, you want that.
For sure, man. Yeah, and you can get a lot of people to buy that. 4 million people in the U.S. bought that thing the first time around. 10 million worldwide. People will buy that, and you can throw some of these in there. You can throw other weird missing things in there or whatever. And then guess what? Alpha's 40th is the next year. So get on the boat with us here, Jeff. Forget all that yes nonsense. You know
what the fans want. Let's go.
All right, so, and then Soul Survivor was great, but it had an odd cut into Heat of the Moment, and it was the shortest of all the Heat of the Moments, I think, on here. Good, pretty tight, but it was a little short compared to the way they will start to stretch it out, which we can talk about here as we get into the Worcester show.
At the Centrum, and now, do you know, I'm not familiar with the Centrum. How big is this place? Is this more of an arena, or is this more of a smaller venue? I would imagine that this would have been a bigger place in '83, because now we're on the Alpha tour.
Concerts 14,800.
So okay, so a fairly decent
it's an arena.
venue. I mean,
yeah,
correct. So now we've got another disc or another album under their belt, so they've got a whole nother stock to pick from.
Right. So now they can do a full show if they really want to, and as they did. And now they are the headliner for sure. And they had a pretty special stage, because if you thought Jeff had a big keyboard rig on the first tour, second tour, he had 28. It's in the Guinness Book of World Records. And I don't even know if that includes the guitar, which he would come out and play on Heat of the Moment, which would make it 29. But I think, and so his riser was above Carl's drum riser.
Yeah.
And they all tend to wear white together to kind of give them the same kind of look. Very 80s thing to do. But then, this one is in Worcester. Again, I think that this sound on here is a little rougher than the Buffalo one. Like this is definitely in the audience. This is a mic in the audience, unless they put a mic in the audience and ran it back to the board. But this, I don't know. It's a little rougher, but I think the band is really good together. The vocals could be a little bit better, but you can really hear the crowd clapping and saying yeah and stuff like that on here a little bit more than you could on the first one.
Yeah, and so I wonder if this was a conscious decision, or was this kind of something that they had recorded for some other purpose other than to put it out live? Because you're right, it does sound like they could have done it a lot better. The mics were not 100%. And you're right, the crowd noise was a little more present there in this deal. So I don't know what the purpose of this recording was to begin with in 1983.
Yeah, and I feel like it took them a while maybe to get the sound right from the board too, even if this wasn't through the board, but just to get the sound right for the hall, because like on Heat Goes On, it's well done, but How's a little tinny, and that's usually not the case. But Jeff was sounding better, and I think by the fourth song, Eye to Eye, it was kind of sorted. Still feels like it's bootlegged. But then Only Time Will Tell was tight. Like might be the best Only Time Will Tell that they do out of the five.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like by that point in time they had gotten it rolling. And it's a great song. I mean, I know it wasn't the big hit, but it's still pretty cool. I love that. Every time it comes on the radio, I crank that thing up. It's almost like I don't even think about it. Like all of a sudden I'm like, wow, the radio's really loud. Oh, it's right. Only Time Will Tell. Fantastic. Yeah, that keyboard beginning to it is very 80s.
Very.
But it's also, we were talking before about the 40th, released the 40th anniversary of the original Asia album. There are people that have no idea who this is. I don't know Asia. Oh yeah, I love that song. Of course you do.
Yes.
Because you've heard it a million times.
And you'll hear, here comes the feeling, I didn't know that. It's pretty good. Like, yes, I know. It is. I've been trying to tell you this for years. But no, I think Jeff upped his solo game. Look, when they first went out, everybody gets solo time. Jeff's not really used to that. That's not something he'd always done, had this big soloing in songs, but not like, hey, all eyes on Jeff, so the other guys will go chill out. And I think he did up his game a bit there. I thought Don't Cry was good, and John even spoke about the theme of eyes on the new record, because they do Open Their Eyes, which is great, and Smile Has Left Your Eyes is obviously a big hit for them, and then Don't Cry is something you do with your eyes. So that was kind of a theme of Alpha, and he mentioned it right there.
Yeah, was the Smile Has Left Your Eyes, was that a single?
It was, yeah.
Okay, because I remember, because it sounded very singly to me, and if it was not, then it was on the radio a lot. I just remember that song. That was one of those ones that I forgot was off of Alpha. I get the first two records confused a lot because they came out so close to each other, and a lot of it doesn't sound the same, but it almost sounds like a lot of this could have been one record or a double record.
Right. I mean, yeah, they were made pretty close together, and
yeah.
And they famously talk about how they were forced in by David Geffen. Yes, but Geffen
Yeah.
Records, maybe not David himself. He had John Kolodner do it, I'm sure, but they kind of forced them into the studio, and they didn't really have time to develop. So, of course, yeah, you're going to get a lot of something similar there. Well, plus, I listened to them both back-to-back a lot, too, along with the first B-sides from that era. But, yeah, no, it's also on here. Here Comes the Feeling is big, and it includes Carl's solo again. And, look, Carl's great, and he is rock solid throughout all this. I think he's underrated as a drummer. I think he brings a lot to Asia. of really drives it home, but he also creates a lot of space for both Steve and Jeff to be able to get out there and do their thing. But it's like 15 minutes of Here Comes the Feeling plus Carl's solo. I'm like, yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot for me, guys.
Johns needs a break.
Yeah.
You guys hit it. I'm going to rest my voice.
Yeah.
But you're right, though. I think if you listen to, especially if you listen to Heat of the Moment, that his drumming is, I would categorize it as Spartan. So maybe you think to yourself, he's just an average, he's just laying down the beat back there. But yeah, when he gets into the solo part, wait a minute. But then you remember like the Emerson, Lake and Palmer stuff was pretty complicated.
Pretty intricate, yeah.
So a lot of the times you're right. He was creating space for the others to play. But yeah, underrated drummer, just really a guy who can fill stuff out when he needs to. The sound, it was really cool to hear him play, just kind of let it loose.
Absolutely, yeah. And they do stretch out Heat of the Moment a little bit now. Now they realize, okay, this really is a show closer. We can do more than the 3.5 minutes or whatever it is. We can stretch this out as a way to say goodbye. I noticed that Steve was doing a lot of the talking during the breaks. And I don't know if that's to save John's voice because now he has to do the full show and he's really the only lead singer. Or he's like, I'm Steve Howe and I'm a big deal. I'm the leader of this band and I will be telling people what's going on with us. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either because he doesn't do that. He doesn't do it at all in the Tokyo show. So I think maybe you're right. Maybe it's like that, hey, man, I need you to take the crowd work here because I'm feeling maybe the voice could come out from under me here. So, yeah, I'm going to do as little as possible other than sing these songs. I don't know.
Who knows? But I mean, they're working together there, and it's good to hear stuff like The Last to Know, right? That was on Alpha. It's the only show that you hear The Last to Know on. Do you hear Midnight Sun again after this? Yes, it was on the first one, but it hadn't been recorded yet. Steve does Valley of Rocks in his solo, and he may do Clap every time, but he doesn't do that every time. So it's got some really good moments on here, that's for sure. The audio's not the best. I mean, it's probably 5th out of 5, but the performance itself is pretty good. And Don't Cry is good. That's the first time we hear Don't Cry, obviously. And Don't Cry is obviously a staple, and it's something they can mix up a lot. This is pretty true to the radio Don't Cry.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, in my thinking, I want this show to go on forever and for you to play all the songs that you played last time plus the new ones. And it's interesting to see what stays and what goes on these things as you get more content, you're going to have to get rid of some things. So it's interesting to see how the set list changes. And again, you got to keep it interesting for the band too. You can't just play the same songs in the same order, or they would go insane. But I'm trying to remember exactly when like the problems in the band started. Famously that Asia in Asia show, John Wetton was not a part of. And so to hear that,
which is 3 months after this, by the way.
Okay. So I mean,
3.5 maybe. Yeah. They basically finished the tour, and Steve was like, "That's it. He's a drunken idiot, and I'm not working with him, and he's out." And they went and got Greg Lake at great expense, and Greg's a little flippant about it now. He's like, "Oh, Geffen offered me so much money, I couldn't turn it down." And then he goes, "Why didn't you continue with it, Greg?" He's like, "Oh, it's that corporate rock. I didn't want to be part of that." I'm like, whatever, dude. I've heard you in Tokyo with Asia, and you sucked in Asia, man. Your voice was not good in Asia. You might be a rock star in your own right, but, you're not, go away. So, so this is one of the final shows. This tour was the last time they played together for 23 years. Because the tensions were starting to build up. Like you said, they really didn't want to, it's not that they didn't want to make the record, but I don't think they wanted to make it that quick. Other things were happening, other problems. So yeah, to get this part of the catalog live is interesting too, because this was not going to happen for another 20 years. Right, yeah, because then, they do the tour. It's not just that one show, Asia in Asia, which they broadcast on MTV, but they did a tour of Japan, which I think made them a lot of money, but it didn't work with Greg Lake musically, maybe not personality-wise either. So then Clodder's like, all right, let's get back together with John Wetton. John Wetton's like, fine, I'll come back, but you got to get rid of Steve Howe. So that's what they did. They continued on with Mandy Moore. No, wait, Mandy Meyer. Mandy Moore. Okay. Your name's Mandy. That's a strike. One, why you didn't work in Asia. But anyway, Mandy, I'm sorry. I'm sure you're not listening. But yes, so then that was the
corner
collapse
crying
of
now.
Asia. But we did see a little bit from Astra eventually on these shows, which surprised
Yes.
me a little bit. We'll get into that later. But I guess that would conclude discs 3 and 4. And then, we march forward to 2007. And I give them credit that they didn't include the Tokyo show from 2007 because it's one they released and called Fantasia Live in Tokyo. It was when they were coming back on tour. They wanted to celebrate their 25th. They did not have a record deal, so they're like, all right, well, we'll go out and tour as Original Asia. We'll drum up some steam and some spirit, and we'll get a record contract that way. And that was released as a DVD and a CD. The CD was included in earlier this year, I think it was in May or so. They released a new clamshell box set of Original Asia the reunion years. So it had Phoenix, Omega, and Triple X, along with that as the live album, along with, just like this, some original Roger Dean artwork. Now, none of that was new as far as the music goes, but it was that time for the band. And I figured they would stick it in here too, but they didn't, which I'm happy about. This is from Sao Paulo, Brazil, and it was actually the end of that tour. They did a tour in like 2006, 2007, and they wound up in Sao Paulo. So it's the final night of the tour. And all right away, it's like the sound and the mix is so much clearer, and the band sound so good at this show.
And now we're getting into a little bit of the funkiness here. We're getting a little more friendly with everybody, and we're putting other stuff on here, which I thought was really cool. I had never heard this before.
Me neither.
We get Roundabout. Okay, that's interesting. We've got let's see, what Court of the Crimson King,
right?
Video Killed the Radio Star. I think do we have Fanfare for the Common Man. So it was cool to hear. This is pretty much, well, maybe not in 82, but if we could go back to 82 right now, we would want to hear this stuff because these are really cool songs that they were a part of.
That's right.
And I know when they went into I saw the track listing for Video Kills the Radio Star. I'm like, all right, well, the Buggles, you got to put that in there. But that actually really worked. I really like that. Wetton he had the effect where he was talking through like a megaphone, kind of like that, wireless back in, and then instead of OEO, he plays it on the guitar instead of somebody vocalizing that. The intro part, I thought it worked.
I thought that might have even been Jeff saying it through the keyboard, kind of like Peter Frampton speaks through his guitar.
Oh, okay. It could, yeah. It just, the whole thing just worked, even though Trevor Horn was the original vocalist.
Right.
John did a good job. Working with it. Yeah.
Absolutely, and he served Roundabout. He's nowhere near John Anderson's register,
right?
But it sounded good, and again, it was like, and I think they picked the right four, to be honest with you, to represent each of their bands. It all made sense. Yeah, absolutely. Now John is doing most of the talking,
right?
And Carl's doing a little bit. I think the background singing comes through much better on this one than versus the past, and that's obviously because it's going straight through the board.
Mm-hmm. And I like Don't Cry now that they did the acoustic version again. You've heard this song a million times, and here's something a little bit different. Okay, I don't really want to hear it exactly how it would be on the record. Let's throw something a little bit different at me.
Yeah, and maybe if it doesn't sound quite right live when you're plugged in versus what it was like in the studio, then absolutely mix it up. And you got a little mandolin from Hal, I think, and acoustic from John Wetton. That's great. Back to Roundabout real quick, though. I thought Wetton was good on the vocals. I thought I noticeably could say, all right, he may be a good bass player, but he's no Chris Squire.
Well, yeah, you're right. He's not. But Chris Squire wasn't singing lead either, so relax.
I know. But it's like, it's like, this is obviously not Chris, but yes, we're honoring the song and Steve's getting his part in, yes. So that's,
you want a yes
good.
Song? Here's your
Maybe
yes
it was
song.
a little slower. I don't know, I thought by the time they got to Without You, finally the vocals were tight and the backups with them kind of all in harmony was good. And I thought finally there was good sonic balance between Steve and Jeff because they're both kind of in that middle register. And sometimes Steve sounds really good, and to me Steve sounds great on this. Sometimes Jeff is off or Jeff is too fat in there. And I thought that was when it was finally clean.
Well, that's the thing that stinks too about the vocals are an instrument.
Yes.
Right? I mean, it's part of the sound, but if you've got a guitar, if you got a keyboard or a bass or drums or anything, you can tune it. right? You go to the beginning of okay, if it's in tune, it's in tune. Let's go. The voice, you've been working with it. It could take a little time to get warmed up, and I think I was looking at Twitter the other day, and Nad from Steve Hackett's band said something like, "Yeah, it takes a couple of shows to get everything dialed in." I mean,
Sure.
and then if it's cold out or whatever, like you just don't. It's a precision deal, and it's way more fickle than an actual musical instrument.
Yeah, and this is the last night of the tour, so now it's all warmed up, it's humming along, it's doing great, and everyone seems to be in a good mood. Everyone seems to be on. Only Time Will Tell has some nice stuff from Carl. I think like at the beginning he's on some timpanis or something like that. It was right after they do Heat Goes On, and then now his solo is part of that instead of Here Comes the Feeling, which is out. But now I think that's kind of part of Jeff's solo time, which they kind of start to call Bolero. But anyway, like he was all jazzed up after his big long solo, and now he's adding little things on to Only Time Will Tell. But the fact that then they come back out with Ride Easy, which is a slow and sweet song, and they bring it down a little bit, and they talk about how much this song means to them, but they hadn't been playing it, obviously, because it was a B-side. To break it out here and to give it some reverence, I think that's pretty. I think it's very well done.
Yeah, and then to close with Heat of the Moment again, that's the big one. You're gonna hear it. They're not gonna not play it. So it is kind of interesting to hold that till the end, the big one. And so and I'm pretty sure they even did that back in when we saw them in '92. They held that to the end. They had the beginning part, and then they brought Steve Howe in. Then he did some stuff. He did his solo, and then they went into like more of the classic stuff. So it is kind of cool. Like they do that at the beginning. You're kind of like, oh well, all right. What else have you got for me? You already kind of blew me out on the.
Yeah, Jeff gets to hop around with his guitar with Steve and John and stuff, and get out from back there. Yeah, absolutely. Now, it was good, but I think John wanted 4 more bars and the other guys weren't really ready for it. And he's like, 1 more time. And they kind of went through it a little bit. But they stretch it out. Look, this might be the best of the 5 shows. As far as the sound of it was great. And they were all just kind of on and in good mood, just hitting on all cylinders. Brought in some classics, too. I don't know if it's my favorite set list. That would probably be from, I don't know. Anyway, I don't know. To me, this might just be the high water mark of the 5.
Yeah, and like you were saying before, this was kind of like an official, unofficial deal. They didn't have a new record out. They hadn't worked together in a while, so it was kind of like, seeing your old friends, and let's just go out to do it. We don't have anything to promote.
Right.
So it was interesting to see that. Yeah, I think people are ready now for us to throw in the classics. People that would show up to see this would now be fans of the other bands that we were in, so we can include some of it. And yeah, I agree with you. I think this was the best sounding. I think they had the most energy. I think the next one may suffer a little bit from the crowd, I think.
Well, look, here's the thing. They hadn't been together in so long. They finally get back together. They don't have a record contract. So let's go out. Do you think there'll be people who want to do it? What can we do? Well, we can tour Japan. Oh, that went well. Let's go to the U.S. Oh, went well. And let's go to South America. Let's go more U.S. days. And then by the end, they're like, yeah, this is working. This is going to work. We're going to get a record deal. This is all going to happen. But that's in in March of 2007. And then in May of 2008, they've got their record contract. They made the record. They're out on tour, and they're back in Tokyo. And so they might have been a little worn out.
Could have been, yeah. I mean, and we've talked about this before, too. Like, you kind of have these thoughts of, hey, I mean, I've been on tour before. I know how to do this. This is no problem. Yeah, 20 years ago, you were on these big tours. Yeah, now you're 20 years older. Yeah, maybe you don't, it's not, you've forgotten kind of the grind of it. I don't know. And then, to go all over the world to do this, it does take a toll on you. And I remember I saw that when the Police did their reunion tour, they had a really clear version of it from somewhere in Japan. It was like everybody's sitting down. I mean, they're very polite, they're very into it, but it's like this is not a crowd I'm used to seeing. And I remember reading comments and people were like, yeah, that's just Japanese society. They're more polite. They're not like the rest of us animals. But again, if you're performing, does that kind of lose something when you're like, no, I want these people up and jumping around and screaming and holding up signs and all that kind of stuff.
I agree with you. Totally. So although the one that came out from 2006 or 7 was good, but then again, they're on that first tour again. They're excited to be out and doing it together again and finding their sound together. It's cool they open with Daylight, the B-side to... Is Daylight the B-side to Only Time Will Tell, or is it the B-side to Don't Cry?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Anyway, it's one of 3 B-sides from the first 2 albums.
Yeah, it is cool because, again, I don't see this anywhere else on here. I don't know when else they played this. Maybe never. I don't know. But, yeah, it is cool to have other tracks pulled out of the vault. Was that on some kind of Japanese deal? And so maybe it would have resonated better there? I don't know. But to see that on the set list is interesting. Again, they're trying to change it up. They're trying to get more. They're trying to put more content in there that you haven't seen.
Well, yeah, and if you're a fan of the first 2 albums, I mean, it was one of the B-sides to one of the singles, and I feel like it was Don't Cry.
Okay.
Or it was at least on Alpha, because I think the 2, Ride Easy was one of the B-sides. I'm fairly certain it was the B-side to Heat of the Moment. Plus, it was on the tape, if you bought the tape, allegedly, in 1982. That was the bonus track for buying the cassette, or the CD if they made them that far back, but not on the LP. And then the other song was Lying to Yourself, which was a Hal Wetton composition. And I don't think Steve Howe and John Wetton wrote anything together for the second album.
Well, if Wetton wanted him out of the band, probably not. It looks like Daylight was the B-side to Don't Cry.
It was. Okay, good.
Okay.
Yeah, see, I know stuff.
Yeah.
That's why I host this little show with my friend Action Jackson. And I thought it was good, Daylight. And then Only Time Will Tell, you put that up second. Now that's mixing it up a little bit. If that's your second biggest hit, or maybe third, putting that right up number 2 is a way to go, but it keeps the energy going, huh?
Yeah, and then again, if you go into Wildest Dreams, that's another one. You're going to recognize that from the back catalog. So yeah, a strong way to start that off. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know if that Daylight sold better in Japan. I don't know why they did that. But it was interesting that they put it in there, and an interesting way to start the set.
Yeah.
Because you never know. It's got to be tough. You don't want to go out too hot. You want to have something that people would know.
Right.
I don't know. Because you're not going to – there are times when he introduces the stuff. Like, here's the song off our blah, blah, blah record, and you may recognize this. But the first one, you're not going to get that. The first one you go right into. So either you're going to get it or you're not. Hopefully you like it.
It was, of course, on Aurora. It was an EP that was released, I think, in around 1986 that had the 3 B-sides and one more song from Astra that I think was also a B-side, but it was on the record. And it was called Aurora because they wanted to call it Arcadia, but the Duran Duran spin-off band Arcadia was their name was Arcadia. So they're like, okay, we can't call it Arcadia, we call it Aurora. And that's a little bit of deep Asia knowledge for you guys out there.
There you go. And now you know.
And now you know, because everybody wanted to, right? Please check out this word from our sponsors.
Oh, wait. We don't have any sponsors.
But then they go into Never Again, which is a song off of Phoenix, the album they made. And it fit in well, I thought. It sounded good, had good tempo. You could tell they had good energy on it, like they're excited to play something new. And it fit in very well. Yeah, and it's cool that band that had been around that long and had so much back catalog stuff would go ahead and put out a new record. I know that's... People are on the fence about doing that now. These classic bands, why should I? Why should I put out new material when you really only want to hear the classic stuff? But I think if you've got songs to still sing, I welcome new material. I want to hear what else you got to work on. Yeah, and Asia, it's not like they had 12 albums together. They had 2, right? So it's like we broke up before we should have. We didn't really get the fair chance that we got, so let's go ahead and put something together between us. And Never Again fits in. And then they go into Roundabout, and I got to say, some of these, because they do the exact same 4 songs from their old bands as they did the last tour. And so maybe Roundabout and Fanfare and Video Killed the Radio Star and those Court of the Crimson King, which is kind of a downer anyway. Maybe, especially to people just sitting on their hands like they're in Japan, those 4 seemed a little weak, and they didn't switch any of them out. They didn't bring us any new songs from there, so maybe that's part of it too. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, all of those, you're right. All of the bands, well, maybe except for the Buggles, had, plenty of stuff to pick from. You could have thrown in a different track from every one of those bands. So, yeah, maybe that was it, that it was just not fresh enough for you on this one. Maybe so. But it just kind of, And of course, we get Time Again, which was the first one they wrote together, and it's all five of them, I do believe. But you go into Bolero, which is basically Jeff's solo time, and now it incorporates part of Here Comes the Feeling, because they're not doing Here Comes the Feeling anymore. So he can kind of put that in there as well. But then they go into an acoustic set, and John comes up with an acoustic guitar, and Jeff maybe sits out or he plays on the piano, and Carl kind of keeps it low or maybe even gets out the brushes a little bit. But, Steve does clap in his acoustic bit. John does Voice of America by himself, which when I saw it, I'm like, there's no way Steve played on Voice of America. And then, because Steve doesn't like to play on songs that are from his bands that he didn't play on.
Right.
But no, it's acoustic. It's just John by himself. And it's good. And then when they go to the Smiles After Your Eyes, which is next, you got a quiet piano from Jeff. Steve's acoustic. Carl's nice and quiet. And then they do Ride Easy in the acoustic as well. So nice little acoustic bit in the middle there.
Right. Yeah, and it works. Again, we're changing some stuff up, and it is a nice change of pace when you I don't know, like you kind of feel like you're getting a little more out of the show if they change it up. Like they're not just kind of rushing through everything. It's not just, you get a little bit of, because I don't know, when I go to a show, I don't want to feel like you're kind of rushing me out the door. I want to feel like, we have I like when they call it an evening with whoever, and you're kind of, maybe you tell me a little story, maybe you intro the band, you kind of have a little bit of you do a little crowd work, and to change it up with the acoustic set, okay, give me something new that I haven't heard before.
And it probably helps John Wetton's voice. I mean, especially on something like The Smile Has Left Your Eyes.
Right.
If he can do that over a slight piano versus trying to, sing it over Carl's drums and the other two in the mid-range, like trying to outduel each other, that's probably pretty helpful. So and then you can just sit up there and then come back for the second part, and you get into stuff like Open Your Eyes, and again, Fanfare for the Common Man is kind of like to me the second time around. But he introduces An Extraordinary Life, which is a new song, and he talked about being a song of promise and the value of life. And it sounded great. There's got a little backup in there. It sounds really good.
Yeah, and I like the fact that he introed that, because again, you may at that point in time, did you have the record? I don't know, but it kind of gets you in the space of I know what I'm getting now. I can kind of prepare myself instead of one of those like, wait, what is this? What's going on here? And then maybe halfway through, oh, okay, I understand what song they're playing now. I like the intro, the kind of get yourself ready for what you're gonna get into.
Yeah, so it fit in well. They didn't do too much of the new one. Because now they're doing stuff from the first two albums, plus 4 songs from legacy bands, plus you put in a couple more. All right, well, we're starting to stretch out the set. 21 songs in this set list. That's good. For men of their age and all the stuff they're doing, 21 songs is good. After they do some of the legacy songs, and then The Heat Goes On, which now features Carl's big solo.
Yeah, now you're going to close the show out with the big hits.
The big hits.
Starting with Heat of the Moment.
Yes. Not closing with Heat. Only one, and this may be the only tour they ever did where they didn't close with Heat of the Moment.
But you go in from that, you go into Don't Cry, and then I like Soul Survivor. I think it's kind of one of their underrated, hits, and it's nice to hear that. And it is nice to have I don't know, if you've been to the shows before, maybe you thought, Heat of the Moment was the last one, but then they're going to throw some other stuff at you. That was pretty cool. Nice change up.
They do change it up, and see, that's what I respect. They changed it up. I thought the intro was weak. Steve's intro just sounded weak to me. Maybe it's because they had to make it lower because the crowd's just sitting there looking at them. But I just thought it was all of it. And then I said all of it was kind of bad. It must be tough if you're doing Heat of the Moment and you're trying to get people to clap along and they're just kind of staring at you. That must be tough. But then Don't Cry was not acoustic, but it wasn't the huge rocked out version of Don't Cry. It's like yet another version of Don't Cry.
Yeah, and that's got to be, to do it as you would on the record, that's a lot. So to kind of tune it down a little bit, and I'd rather have you, if you can't or don't really want to do it the full pull, I'd rather have you kind of adjust it a little bit and give it to me a little bit differently than miss on either the energy or the high notes.
Yeah, and John plays his role on this one. Does a good job. Soul Survivor, it's one of the 5 times you get it. I think the last Soul Survivor may be a little bit tired. Not this one, but you can really hear him belt it out on the first one, and it's it's kind of a hit for them. And then by the end, I just think hold those notes, because if you're ready for it, so, but if you're tired, it's like so survive. It's like. It's probably the one that's a little less fun to sing anyway. Maybe not to play, but to sing. I'm just guessing.
And to have that be at the end too, you kind of already. I mean, you're
tired from the night, yeah. Because it's one of the 4 that you get all 5 times.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I'm with you there, Jackson. The crowd, I think, hurts the sound. The acoustic part came off well. Probably because that's when you want the crowd to kind of sit still and be quiet, right?
Exactly. But you're right. In order to get into the big stuff at the end, yeah, you need them. You need that. You need to get re-energized.
Mm-hmm.
And if the crowd's not giving it to you, that's got to be tough. And I know I've heard that before from other people. When they go on these huge tours, and you say, okay, it's show 35, and we're out in the middle of nowhere. I'm not feeling it. You let the crowd. Okay, the crowd's picking me up. The crowd is what's going to propel me. And if you're not getting that, that's rough. It's got to be rough.
Absolutely. And I think it does come through. So although the sound quality is good,
mm-hmm.
the performance was definitely affected by, I think, the crowd. And, that's just my opinion. Clear, crisp, but not their greatest performance of these 5.
Right, and it does really sound like there's almost no one there.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I think it's a combination of the way it was recorded and just the overall feeling there.
Definitely. All right. Well, that's the 4th show in Tokyo, Japan from May of 2008. The 5th show's 2.5 years later, wrapping up in London in the UK, 14 December 2010. So almost 11 years as we're recording this, Jackson. And I never heard this before. I'd never heard this one. And I think it's a really good way to wrap it up.
Yeah, it's nice that it's in the UK, kind of back home for everybody. I don't know. It kind of makes me sad because this was the last one, and I don't know exactly how much they recorded after this. I know Wetton died in 2017, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 2017. So, and I think I saw something recently with Jeff Downs saying that he's got some material that they maybe had worked on. He went and worked on. So, I mean, we may get more stuff from him. I don't know. But yeah, I think if you were going to close it out this first volume, this was a kind of a cool way to do it. To have someplace like this, no offense to anybody that lives out in the middle of nowhere, but not a middle of nowhere show.
Well, that's right. I mean, look, they're a lot more popular in America than they are in the UK, but they want to be, do good shows at home, obviously. And it's right before the holidays, right? It's 14th of December. Even says, Merry Christmas to everybody on there, to have a good Christmas. And it's great to be able to, you have to tour the world, great. But if it gets to the end of the year, let's wind up at home, and then I'm at home at the end of the year. And you see a lot of that here in England, of course, in North America as well. But this is a real change, okay? So the change in between 2007 and 2008 is that they're now doing some new material, and they take a break to do this acoustic bit in the middle, and they do 2 new songs versus everything else is legacy either of their band or others. Now they've got a second album out, and they did record Triple X after this, Jackson, in 2012, and they toured on that. Triple X for 30, as in it's 30 years since the beginning, and so hopefully we'll get some of that stuff maybe in a volume 2. And then they made an album, Gravitas, after that without Steve Howe. We had a kid named Sam Colson come in and play, and he was good because Steve was balancing Yes and Asia, and then he's like, I can't do both anymore. And so he stuck with Yes. In fact, they were touring together, and a lot of times he would play the opening act and the main act.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I remember that. That had to be a big ask from him at that point in time. That's a lot of stage time.
Right, yeah. So he's like, all right, if I can do one or the other, I'll take the bigger act. I'll take Yes. And Jeff was even doing it too. And but now they've got 2 albums worth of music out at this point. So they're going to say, let's take out the legacy stuff. No one came to see us play Court of the Crimson King, Let's play more Asia stuff. And so they play a lot more stuff off of Omega, and some of it really does fit in really well. I mean, it's them, it's classic Asia. There's not a ton of stuff from Steve Howe, but there's some. There's a bit. Because most of it was Wet and Downs, and I think on the previous album, Steve contributed some songs, but he wrote them by himself. Whereas he wrote with John again, I think, finally on Omega, which is kind of cool because they were the two who put the band together in the first place.
Yeah, and you kind of want to hear the original. The sauce is never as good as it's not with the original people. So to have that back again, yeah, I believe that's the way to do it. That's the purest sound from the band. So that was good to hear. And yeah, I mean, by this point in time, you're right. They didn't need the legacy stuff anymore. And so it was kind of cool, like to hear that again a third time would have been like, okay, we got that. So it was cool that they changed it up and gave us this performance with all of the Asia stuff on there, both the new stuff and their catalog.
Yeah, absolutely. And they come out firing with I Believe, like their new single, which is, you got to have some confidence to do that.
I was just going to say that. Yeah, I mean, if you've got new stuff that you feel good about, yeah, lead with that. Don't bury that. Say, this is why we're here. You're going to hear the hits. You're going to hear the classic stuff. But this is the new stuff that we're proud of. We've worked on it. Here you go.
Yeah, and it's very positive, I believe. It's a good vibe. New life. I thought it was great. And then they back it up again. Only Time Will Tell is number 2. So you're keeping that energy up, and it was better than the one from Tokyo for sure. It was a little bit different ending, and I liked it. Like that's cool. I'm glad they got that back. But then But then it's right to Holy War, which is another new song, and it's an upbeat song. At least the rhythm's upbeat, even if lyrics are talking about holy war, which is not necessarily positive, but you can tell they're glad to play this new stuff. It's really shining through here. And obviously it's balancing out with some of the older stuff too. So although it's not like I got this, I'm like, oh man, this is the greatest Asia album since Alpha. To hear it now and to hear it with the other stuff, I'm like, yeah, they maybe all 12 new songs weren't awesome, but there are 4 or 5 in here that fit in well with the old catalog.
And I think it's cool to hear a show like this because it seems like the band's firing on all cylinders. I mean, like you said, they've got new material. They're excited for you to hear it as the crowd, and it's not like a nostalgia act.
Exactly.
Like, like when you see something, you see a band that gets back together and they do nothing new. It's all you're just running through it's a cash grab. I get it, but like, at least pretend like you're back together again.
Well, they're working for it, right? They're putting out new records. They're working for it. They're going on tour. And I can see, like, if you look at this overall set list and you had not seen them on the previous 2 tours, you might be disappointed that they didn't do more old stuff. But in having the box set and seeing the evolution from here we were when we just got back together to tour, and then here we are at the first album, and then here we are on the second album, I think it's great to hear some new stuff blend in with the old stuff. And Through My Veins is another new one. And Wetton seems psyched about it. And he's psyched that he and Steve wrote it together.
Yeah, I think you're right. If they had released this as a standalone deal, maybe, okay. But you're right, to hear it as part of the compilation, how they evolve from, one tour to another is interesting, and I think it fits in well.
Taking you on a little bit of a journey here, yeah. And they can obviously do it again if there's a volume 2. There's other things to choose from. So we'll see what happens there. But, he finally, Steve does some new solo stuff because he's been doing clap on all of them for so long. So he did everyone's favorite Luke Concerto in D major, second movement, not the first, the second movement by Vivaldi, but also did a little in the course of the day as well. Before they go into what I call the eyes section, which is again, don't cry, smile as left your eyes, and open your eyes. But Don't Cry, again, it's a little different. It's on the piano this time. No Steve, not acoustic, but it's upbeat and clapping. And John's voice just is very rich on this one. Of the 4 versions, it might be my favorite version, man.
Yeah, and again, it's a little bit of a change up. You've heard this song a million times. If you've been to the shows, you've seen it every time they played it. So yeah, give me something new, give me something different, change it up a little bit for 2010. Yeah, I like it. I think it works. It's not the same, but it works.
No, really good, really good. And then it's the same on Smiles Left Your Eyes at first, but then they all come in to the end. They all kind of build it and work their way back in, and it's kind of a big triumphant thing at the end, which then goes into Open Your Eyes, which is kind of epic. It's like, wow, that's actually really good.
Yeah, and I like that, that you start off with one person and then everybody shows up. I mean, again, it's show. I mean, you don't have to do that. You don't have to present it that way, but it is cool because you kind of builds and you feel like, yeah, they're back together and we're all here together in this arena.
Right.
And I like that, yeah.
Yeah, no, so it was great. And that ends up disc 9. And you come back on disc 10 as part of the show. And again, they're pushing new stuff. You got Finger on the Trigger, which has got a little bit of a heavier riff to it.
But it fits.
But it fits. Yeah, it's good stuff. They do Time Again, which they do every time. And then they do Extraordinary Life, which to me, if there's a knock on this one, it isn't actually as good as the last one. Like, Extraordinary Life was actually pretty good on the Tokyo show. This one maybe wasn't, but that would be what, just the knock I have against this one is that the second time around, that wasn't as good.
Okay. I would agree with you. It's not bad, but no, it doesn't have the same energy as the Tokyo show.
Yeah, but when they do End of the World, which is one that I didn't really remember very well, I feel like it has more with the vocals, both with John and Steve and Jeff. But I feel like it's a standout for Wetton. And he was really looking forward to singing it. He sang it well. And it really sounds like this tune was evidence of Asia evolving out of what they were. Because the first time you do an album together, first in 20 some odd years, you're feeling around, you might get a couple out of it. But this second album had more. But it's them really coming from 82, 83. Like, Steve is great. Jeff is right where he needs to be. Carl is always great. And I don't know. This stood out to me is this really does fit in with what they were trying to do back in the day.
Mm-hmm. And it's you can take some more chances when you've got some traction. I think that they had broken up for a long time. They got back together. Now they're kind of firing on all cylinders again as a band. Yeah, you can put this together and make it sound new, but also like it fits in with the catalog stuff.
It absolutely
you don't want to make it exactly sound like that, like you're kind of retreading it, but kind of like an evolution. Because I hate when bands do that. I hate when they put out a record where they're like, wait a minute, you're just trying to sound exactly like you did at the beginning.
Right. Which
is when you were the most popular. So yeah, no, I like this. It does follow along. It fits in, but it's also new.
It's new, yeah, exactly. Because then they do Heat Goes On, where you have to heat and that's still not my favorite, but they do that 4 times. I'm not going to not do Heat Goes On, especially once at the end, it becomes Carl's solo once again, and then they come back to it. But then, this is the Soul Survivor that's a little tired to me, and it's the closer of the show. There's an encore, but it's the close of the show. So in 1982-83, Soul Survivor, closer, yeah. But this one was kind of like, it's not bad, but it's not their best. It's just like, so survive. It's
Is this almost over?
Yes. Exactly.
Okay, now another refrain. Here we go. And this is kind of where it's cool to hear the same song a couple of different ways, but it also it sets you up to do this. Okay, of the how many times that you put this on here, I'm going to pick my favorite. Mm-hmm. And you're right. This was kind of a lackluster performance on this song.
I agree. But then they take a little break, and then shockingly, they play Go from Astra, the big single with the big video with Astra hopping around in the future. And Steve's not bad. He gave it a go, not to be silly. But the power chord part of it, I thought was a little weak. And that's Steve. That's what he's not good at. He's good at the intricate part. He's good at hitting stuff in order, in sequence. And even because it goes right into Heat afterwards, the opening chords of Heat are weak to me. That's the weak part. Otherwise, I think Go is pretty good. The non-chord parts, non-power chord things, I thought he did fine. Thought he did well. But it's just he's a little neutered on the chords for both these songs.
I thought that when we saw him play that live in '92, I was like, those are the notes, but it's not like that. Yeah, it's not that like, yeah.
Like, come on, man.
Okay, yeah, is that right? Yeah, it's right, but I need a little more feel. But you're right, he's not the same kind of power chord player. But it is. I like that they put that on there, even though that was not a Steve Howe song. I mean, because it was everybody else but him
right on
that record. So at least you can say, okay, like they didn't do any of the other stuff like when it was really just Palmer and Downs in the band.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even think Carl Palmer wasn't even there in '92, was he? It was just Jeff Downs.
It was just Jeff Downs.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, but they didn't put any of that stuff in there. But they put this one in there. Yeah. Steve obviously was okay playing it. It was good to hear something from that record, which you kind of forget about after the first two. And so I'm glad that they included that one in there and that he played ball for this one.
Yeah, I don't know. At first, he didn't sound great, and I was thinking maybe it's because it's so obligatory. But as it goes on, I think it really sounds like John and the crowd were really into it and having fun with it in London right before Christmas. So, you know what? It's pretty good. It's pretty. Steve could have sounded better, but it's pretty good. This live in London was very good. I mean, very different set list from the first 4 discs, but very good. I mean, certainly I put it at 3. I don't know if I can put it at 2 or not, but I don't know. Of the 5 sets, what's your favorite? Can you do a 1 to 5?
Okay, let's see. Let me go back and look here. I think I like the first set from Buffalo just because that's the raw, that's the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say probably the second one would be, when did they bring in the new of the legacy stuff?
Brazil. 3, Brazil, yeah.
Yeah, so that would be 2. Then the 3 would be London, then Worcester, and then the Tokyo one just for me, just because of the energy on there. I would put as the last one.
I would too. Be thinking about your set list though in order though, because we're gonna do that.
Set list. Okay, let's see.
For me, I put as number 1. I put Brazil. I put that as number 1 because the sound is so good. They really seem to be happy playing together again. Great set list. Mix it up with Don't Cry. I think I put Buffalo at 2 because you're right, it is them playing the original. I kind of already had it, so I was familiar with it. So I could maybe even slide it down to 3 and put London 2010 as number 2.
Okay.
It's close. Okay. It's close. Maybe. It's just, yeah. It's like I owned Buffalo before. I heard it before. I think it's better now. But I was familiar with it, and not having heard this London one and the brand new set list, that could be 2. Worcester is 4, and then Tokyo's 5. The other Tokyo from the year before is so much better. It's basically the same as the one as Brazil, but it's so much better, and it's the same exact place. So I leave that last.
So what was your overall thought of the whole thing? I mean, when you heard it was going to be released till you actually getting it, I mean, is it what you expected? Is it better? Is it worse? Did it live up to the expectations?
Yeah, so I think it definitely lived up to it. It hasn't exceeded it in a huge way. It's just I wasn't totally familiar. Some of these I'd heard before. The first 2 I had definitely heard before. I thought that I'd heard the 4th, but I hadn't. The quality of the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, as far as the quality of the recording, is very good. The first 2, which I was familiar with, they're cleaned up a bit. It's not totally different. I was familiar with them, but I'm glad that they're in there, and I'm hopeful for more stuff from that era because there's only so much of it. I would like to hear more nights that they did on those first 2 tours. But yeah, that's great. The booklet is nice. Again, I'm a little disappointed at the fact there's no... You would think on the back of each of these, instead of some sepia-colored instrument, they would have a photo of the band from that era, whether it's a press photo or the back of the album cover photo or a live photo from them playing at that time. They have a lot from the reunion tour in here, and it's nice. Look, it's well done. I'm not complaining about its quality at all. They've got the leopard eagle on about every page in some form or another. It's always nice to get Roger Dean's autograph. Dave Gallant did a good job, with the wording and all that. And I like the fact that the box isn't huge. They didn't make it into an LP-sized box where you can pull them out of safe things because now it fits well on the shelf. There's a consistency to all of them. Maybe a little bit because everyone's basically exact same except for the color and this was at Massey Hall or this was at wherever. But overall, I think it's a quality piece. It's a way for them to get some of those that were released individually in the 2005 or even 2003 all the way up to now. Put the best together and make something nice out of it. Get some original Roger Dean, which I love. So no, it's quality. If you're an Asia fan, you absolutely ought to get this. Absolutely.
I agree. When they announced it, I said, "Ooh, this is this is ambitious. This is a lot to put a 10-disc set. Okay, what is this going to be? But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. You're right. The packaging looks great. The original artwork is fantastic. To hear the progression from 1983 to 2010 is really cool too. If you're an Asia fan, to hear some of the songs are the same, some are not. What they left in, what they kept, and to hear how the set list changed. I think it's good. I don't think it's excessive at all. I think it all works really well.
What about your favorite set list? You do favorite and least favorite, or can you do a 5 in a row? I don't know if I can do 5 in a row.
Yeah, I think my favorite set list was probably the 2007, the Brazil show in 2007, because again, they to me this was more like you can do whatever you want. It was more fast and loose. Mm-hmm. They had the old stuff. This was the first time that they had put in the legacy songs. That I like the Don't Cry acoustic. Smiles Left Your Eyes is on there. And I really did like the video Killed the Radio Star. The Heat Goes On was good. Yeah, I think that's the best mix of old stuff, new stuff. They're coming back. That's my favorite.
See, to me, sadly, it might be the Tokyo set list.
Even though you're just talking about set list. I'm just talking about
the set list. I know, but considering it's my least favorite recording,
yeah,
I think it's the best set list because it basically has the same stuff as yours, except they do throw in Daylight and they keep Ride Easy, and they throw in Voice of America, and you lose One Step Closer, which I like off of yours, but they redid Don't Cry. It's a little different, right? And the fact that Heat of the Moment isn't the last one, along with 2 new songs that blended in, even if they're not my favorite, they're pushing the limits again. So I don't know, the set list to me, yeah, number 1 is Tokyo, which is kind of too bad. I don't think there's necessarily a bad set list on here. I mean, how can you argue against the CD2 set list? It's the first. Yeah. It's the first 2 albums. We love that. And I agree with you that the third is great. So, and I love the last one because if you've already listened to these 4. The last one is a great evolution, and the new songs are killer.
Yeah, it is really hard. And like I said, when I heard this was announced, I thought, what are we going to do? Is this going to be exactly the same thing over and over and over again? And no, they did a good job of mixing it up and giving you the old stuff reworked in a cool way. Yeah, I don't hate any of them. I don't. There isn't one on there that I was like, ugh. I don't like this at all.
Right.
So I think the whole thing works as a 10-disc set. And I really hope they keep going because it would be cool to hear the Triple X stuff. And who knows, maybe you may even get another show from one of these tours that might sound a little different. I don't know.
Yeah, and did they ever mix up their set list? Even if it's only 1 or 2 songs. All right, yeah, give us that. Give us the 1 or 2 songs, Or did they open for anybody and they only had 50 minutes? Okay, well, get us a couple of those too. Why not? I mean, so we'll see. Again, if you're an Asia fan, you like the original band, you should absolutely pick this up. It is so good. It gives you such a breadth of, over the years, same lineup, but breadth of incarnations as far as where they were in their career at the time and what they had recorded, what their catalog together was.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm really glad they didn't. I mean, no offense to anybody else who was in the band, but I'm glad they just kept it to the 4 original members because you saw it was a better show of an evolution of how they got started and where they ended up in 2010. The other stuff would have been like I probably would have skipped it if it wasn't the original 4.
In all fairness, I don't think anyone's terribly interested in it. I mean, when we got into them, we were already starting. They'd only been broken up a little while. We're like, it'd be really great if they got back together. And it was like 15 years later or something like that they finally did. But yeah, I mean, like you said, no offense to the other incarnations. And they were both in and out. They've had a lot of great players in and out of the bands over the years. But, like we talked about, John's voice, it seemed to get stronger, honestly. From disc 1 to disc 5, you'd think it would be the opposite, or from show 1 to show 5. But I think it just got stronger and better, especially as he cleaned himself up. And he is what makes Asia distinctive Plus the four of them playing together.
Absolutely, and I think you're right. I think he was taking better care of himself later on, which sounds a little strange. You think it would be the other way around, but yeah, just an underrated vocalist and an underrated musician. And I'm glad that they put this out and let you see kind of the whole history of him in this band, or at least up till 2010.
Yeah, amazing. That wraps up our show on Asia's Bootlegs Volume 1, the new box set out now. So if you've got an Asia fan in your life, I highly suggest you go out and get that for them for this Christmas holiday season. It's great. The shows are great. It shows an amazing evolution of the band over time, how tight they were, how they evolved some songs, changed out their set lists, and what they sounded like together at different periods over the decades. And I'm very hopeful that there will be a Volume 2 coming out in 2022. My only hope would be that maybe we get something that's never been released before. All 5 of these were released individually at some point. Now, it's great to have them all in one box set. Whether they cleaned them up or not, from the recording standpoint, I'm not sure. But you gave them all a nice, consistent look. They all fit together well. They all sounded great. And so I'm curious, if you're going to do a Volume 2 and you're going to do more from 82 and 83 and then some more from the reunion years, maybe you break out something that nobody's ever heard before. And of course, maybe, just maybe, put some photos in there from each era so we can see what they looked like during each time. Maybe not necessarily from each show, but from that time. I just think it would add a lot to it. And we thank you for listening with us here. You know, we're big Asia fans. I don't know how many more there are out there, but if you are, we really appreciate you listening. And as usual, we want to know, did we get something right? Did we get something wrong? Did we miss the point? Did we leave out your favorite part? You have to let us know. You can DM us and tweet us at ugly_werewolf and at actionjack72. Of course, you can check out all past episodes at www.uglyamericanwerewolf.libsyn.com, and you can subscribe and download on Good Pods, Podchaser, Apple, Amazon, now on Samsung, really anywhere where you get your podcasts. Next week, we kind of continue on our 80s theme that we've been on here for most of December, and that's with the Smiths' The Queen is Dead. The Smiths were huge over here in England and have been a huge influence on many bands and fans for decades here. Didn't really hit it huge in America, and we're going to talk a little bit about why we think that is and examine The Queen is Dead, which in my opinion is their best record. So until next time, rock and roll fans all around the world, be cool and stay safe.